Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. So could you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, I'm Bhavani Krishnan and I'm a painter. I paint all kinds of subject matter, landscape, still life, portrait. But I have a special love for painting the landscape and plein air. I just love being outside. So that's, I think, my favorite thing to do. I also teach art. Lately, I've been teaching a lot of it online. And I really enjoy coming up with ways to explain everything that I know and to help people improve their art. Yeah.
That's interesting. So how come you're doing more online now? Is there a reason for that?
Oh, because it just started with the pandemic. I started doing online teaching. Before that, I have done in person, but and then I had a baby. So it's just with the toddler, it's just doing it online is like kind of easier because in terms of the flexibility and the number of hours that I have to put in live with the students. So I don't know, it's just more flexible for me to right now to do it online. And in fact, the latest class that I did all pre-recorded lessons. So it was like an online course. And I love the flexibility of that as well, because then I could just work late at night when my toddler is sleeping. And, so that, yeah, it worked out pretty good for me. And even the students, they really enjoyed. They said they were not sure of that format initially, but then once they did it, they said, "Oh, we love this format," and hopefully they were asking me to do more. So hopefully I'll have more in the pipeline. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, is that with a live group with you, or is it a recorded teaching that you do?
Yeah, so I've done both. Some of the workshops have been like live workshops where I have Zoom sessions with the students and we have feedback sessions and all that. But the latest class that I taught, which was called Study the Masters. So basically, it was a class where we studied 10 different master artists, landscape artists. So that was kind of like a 10-week program I did. That was all pre-recorded. So there were no live sessions in that. So everything was pre-recorded. And I would just send for the initial 10 weeks, I was sending out one video out a week. But right now, I'm still like, you can still buy the class and all 10 lessons are available to watch instantly right now. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And for anyone who's not aware, why would you say it is important to study the masters?
So I think one of the biggest things that I got from doing, like, one of the reason I even started this course was that at the end of like last year, I was feeling a bit like, when I was reviewing my own work, I felt like I could do better, but I didn't know how. Like, I felt like, okay, I know a lot of theory and I know a lot of concepts, and I feel like I'm applying all of them, but still I was not that happy with the work. So I thought, okay, let me try to study some masters and actually do like studies of artists, paintings, and see if that will help me see where like why I'm not so happy with my own work. So I started doing that. And in the past, like whenever I've tried to do master studies, I'm always like, it's just too tempting to drop the idea and just do your own original work because that's more exciting. So that's why I kind of did this class thing where I could invite other people to join me and do so that I was accountable. I had to do all the studies and I had to do them properly because I was teaching it. So I had to explain everything because I recorded myself painting them. So that's why I did the class. And it's really, you can easily hear or listen to theory or even look at paintings and you can talk about all the things that are right in the painting. But when you actually copy it, there is something that happens where it gets more ingrained into your mind. Can you still hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay. It's just something that happens that's like it gets more embedded into your system because part of it, like when you are painting, a lot of intuition plays a huge part because there's so many things to think about when you're painting. So as you paint more and more, a lot of things become intuitive, and so it just flows out of you. So when you actually do a copy, um, it really helps to build up that part of the knowledge that's there within you. So instead of just looking at a painting and saying, okay, this is what is right with the painting, or even just watching a YouTube video where they dissect a master painting, they say, okay, this is the composition, this is this is how the eye is flowing, these are the values, these are the colors. You can look at that and, it would make sense, but you're not going to remember that. The next time you go back to painting, you're going to do at least with me, it was like I would go back to doing just what I know.
Yeah.
But when I have this act of actually copying and doing it for 10 weeks, where I copied 10 different master artists, it really helped open my eyes to certain aspects of painting, and really helped me understand kind of what were the things, like the problems in my own work that I couldn't articulate previous to this. I felt like, okay, now I know maybe what I can do to improve it. Like I felt uh, like I just felt like rejuvenated after doing the whole thing, like in terms of my understanding of all the concepts, because it's all the same theory, same concepts, but it's just that each time you feel like you understand it a bit deeper or you feel like you can implement it better. So that's kind of what I felt you can get from copying rather than just looking.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you can point out that you did learn as far as you saying, is there anything where you can say, this was something which I specifically picked up from doing that? And I'll give you an example just to give you time to think, because I've done drawing master studies of a couple of artists, and one is of Turner's Fisherman at Sea. And what I learned from that was how abstract the sea was and how you're just working the tonal values, and then the actual movement and flow of the water just came out of being focused on the abstraction of the light and dark and the interplay of the waves. And I didn't really see it as waves until it was something I could step back from, because at the time
Right.
I was trying to focus on the relation between the darker areas and the subjects. And similar with I think it was Claude Monet's Snowy Landscape at Twilight, I think it was called, but it's all midtone. There's next to no light or dark
Okay.
in there. It's all very subtle midtones interplay. And it was again trying to just work the kind of brush strokes that he did. So trying to push that around with the pencil was really fun, because you had to kind of snake like serpentine sort of, movements with the pencil that I'd never done before to mimic his
Uh-huh.
brush strokes. And then it came about from those actions, which I learned a lot from how much you can describe in very subtle marks that I'd never done before, because I was trying to do higher contrast pieces before that.
Okay.
Is there anything which you can share that you've learned from your master studies that, as you said, helped you with your own work?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the main like takeaways that I felt was from studying all these artists was even though no matter how complex the painting, the design is always simplified, can be simplified into 3 or 4 value groups. And I found that across the board, across all 10 artists that we studied. So that was really empowering to know that, sometimes you look at a landscape and it's so complex, but then the structure is built upon these 3 or 4 value groups. So it was nice to see how they do that, and in different lightings, different kinds of landscapes like seascape, mountains, like all kinds of trees, all kinds of different subjects that we tackled. So that was, I think, huge. The other thing that, as part of this course, what I did was really wanted to focus on color mixing and design. So really said, what I said is the way I set it up was I'm like, okay, forget about, all other things. It's okay if your drawing is not perfect also. It's okay. Like you just have to forgive yourself. It's just too many things to think about. So just let's focus on design and let's focus on color mixing. So just working that way also helped like really narrow the focus of the study, because if you study with intention, it's always so much you gain more out of it rather than if you just haphazardly study, like, or you get overwhelmed if you're just thinking about too many things at the same time. It's easy to get overwhelmed. So so personally for me, one of the challenges that I have been facing prior to and still a little bit is contrast, like you said. So I have the opposite problem where I tend to not have enough contrast in my work. And I knew that, but I still, when I would push the contrast, it would look wrong. So after doing all of these studies, I've come to the realization that maybe it's because I was using the wrong temperature in my darks, or it was because I was using the wrong saturation in my darks, which is why it tends to look wrong. And then I end up not having it dark enough. So this was a personal realization that I had after doing these studies, and something that now, so I've just sort of wrapped up the course recently. So I'm still like working through everything I learned, and it's been really exciting actually to implement, yeah, what I've learned.
Yeah, that is exciting. Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I
yeah.
did notice that because you've got a lovely painting on your Instagram called Sunflower Splendor. And that's something where I noticed that you've got these lovely, vibrant pinks in the sunflowers, which is a very specific, feels like a design choice, which really adds to the painting. And you've got to
Mm.
have experience and confidence to do things like that. Can you talk about how you make those types of decisions?
Yeah, uh, I'm not sunflowers. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly which painting that is. But I tend to use a pink wash at times,
It
like
was a
just
ground.
yeah, it's a ground. Yeah. So sometimes that shows through, and I like, especially with certain landscapes and certain still life paintings, I really like that showing through. So and it's not a very conscious choice that I'm like, okay, intentionally going to have parts of it showing through. It just happens organically with the way I lay down my marks.
Mm.
So that's why that's how the pink comes in, at least. Yeah.
Oh, I see. 'Cause, I mean, I may have misread it, but it looks, yeah, it possibly is. I'm looking at it again now, and it
Oh,
looks, yeah,
sorry,
go
go
on.
ahead.
No, it's okay. It's just, it looks as though you've painted the pink on, but I may be looking at you painting over the top and not covering all of the pink, but it's a lovely, vibrant color coming through all these earth tones that you used otherwise, you know?
Thank you. I actually now I remember which painting that is. And so what happened in that one was when I kind of finished it, there was a little bit of pink showing through, and I liked it. So I decided to incorporate it into the painting. So that's when I think there are some pink lines in that one, right?
Yeah.
So I put in those lines as an afterthought. So it wasn't planned from the beginning. It's just sometimes it's about reacting to what's happening on the canvas. So when that happened, like I saw, I that there were parts of it that was there, and then I was like, oh, I think it could be interesting if I carried it through. So I'm always I'm fascinated by line, and I don't use enough of it. So sometimes it just strikes me to try and push the line part of it, and so that's why I think in this one I was trying to experiment with that, incorporate a little bit of lines with that bright color. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's nice because it's unusual. You don't see that type of color mixing, not mixing, but kind of color combination with those types of still life, because it's an unnatural color with the sunflowers, but it adds so much to the painting. It's such a beautiful execution of the work, of the study, that it's beautiful. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, it works really, really well. But I mean, I love your work anyway because it looks very classically influenced, because it's so nicely kind of balanced of the brushstrokes and the tones, and your application of paint is always just, you can see the experience and the knowledge in the work, because especially with flowers and things like that, you can see that you've used thicker paint for the highlights on the top, which again takes a confidence to leave a brush mark that's not been brushed in, to leave a mark or a paint stroke that's been not brushed in and mixed in, and it have that impact of showing the light on top. Is that something which you is it something which you've kind of built up the confidence in, or is it something which you learned in school? How did that come about?
Oh, so my background is a little weird, wherein I actually didn't do art until much later in my life. So I did my engineering in computer science, and I did my master's in computer science, and I was working as a software engineer at Intel. And so I started painting pretty late, so I don't have a schooling in art. But what I did was, when I got into art, I thought I wanted to do realism, so that's why I went to an atelier. I went to the writer's school in Santa Fe, and I studied there for like 2 semesters. But then I realized that I actually really love to paint loose, and painting with a tiny brush was not for me. So, so when I came back from there, I sought out a teacher who paints in a very loose and abstract manner. So her name is Yerza Wu. She's a local artist in Portland, and I started taking weekly classes with her. So everything about the way I paint right now, and even everything I teach, like the whole fundamentals, I learned from her. So she has a background in animation. So she comes from that school of thought, which is a little different from if you come from the classical realism school of thought. So in that approach, like so she is a very bold painter, so, and I wanted to paint loose. So if for in the way that she taught us and the way that I paint now, it all comes down to being able to simplify um, the design into a few value shapes. And then once you have that in mind, it's really, you can have a lot of fun with your brushwork, because that, like, I don't think in terms of form, like in terms of building up form until much later. So initially it's all flat, and it's all about value shapes. And if all that falls into place, then towards the end of the painting, you can, I work a little bit towards building form in key areas of the painting, and not everywhere. So there are areas that will be still flat and towards the end, and I'm okay with that. It's just that, like, the focal area and like places that need to read well, I will build up form in that. So the bold brushwork really ties in with the simplification in the way that I work. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm curious now because I went to art school, but it was a bit unconventional, and there was only a couple of tutors who I could talk to, and eventually that whittled down to one tutor who I could talk to, really, because the others they kind of discouraged drawing and painting, which was torturous for me because I draw and paint. And the painting tutor had this try certain things in the first year that we were there, and it would be things like going from a large brush to a smaller brush. So you'd make big bold marks, and then you'd start to, cut into that more and more the smaller the brush you'd use. How many brushes do you use to do a painting typically?
Yeah, so typically I have one brush for each value group. So I'll have one brush for light, medium, and dark. So try not to mix them up. So because if your light brush, you dip it into the dark value, you'll have to really clean it up well if you want to get that light value back. So I have at least 3 brushes at the minimum. So usually they are on the larger side, like size 8 brushes is what, but sizes are so varied. It doesn't make, if I had a one, I would show you, but I don't have one right now. But also sometimes I will use a 2-inch brush. And sometimes I will use it in the beginning. And sometimes, I will use that 2-inch brush to go in at the very end and put in a couple of strokes that are really big and bold. It just depends on what the painting needs. So if I will just see what it's like, you have a sort of a conversation with your painting and see what it tells you. And if it's saying that, okay, I'm just too busy, too many small strokes, then you go back in with a big brush and put in that mark. And other times finishing a painting involves like adding more detail. So it just depends on what's going on in the particular painting.
I see.
Yeah.
And as far as your subjects, I mean, do you use photographs, or is it all physical subjects that you light? When it comes to still life, especially, I'm thinking, is this controlled lighting? Is it relying on natural light, or do you use photographic reference? How do you do that?
So mostly it's still life is from life. It's the natural lighting. In my studio, I have it's actually a spare bedroom. So but it has a north window. So I just usually set up the still life near that north window. And most of my still life I've done as part of these Strata challenges. So as part of that, like you have to work from life. So they are mostly from life, but I have done some from photos as well. The one of the sunflowers that you were talking about, I think that's from a photo. So yeah, it just it depends. But I enjoy working from life a lot. I feel like you see a lot more. But I'm not opposed to working from photos. Like I do landscapes also from both from life as well as photos. Yeah.
I mean, I consider photo reference to be about a lot about, I mean, you may disagree with this, I'm not sure, but about composing the negative space and trying to consider what you have to use has to be a lot of considerations before you start the painting process. Is that?
Yes, for sure. When you're working from or anything from life and photo, it's about decisions, right? The choice. Like you have always a painting has to start with the first question, like what is it that inspires you? And what is this painting going to be about? And sometimes you have to revisit that midway through a painting because you kind of lost your direction as you're painting. So you're like, no. What is this painting about? And then that will help you take it to the finish line. Yeah.
So if you're working with natural light, does that pose many challenges? I mean, how long does it take you to finish a painting? And is it something where you have to rely on a time of day to revisit that studio time?
So usually all my still life paintings that I've done, since they were part of like a daily painting challenge, so they're done in a day. So but that so I will work into it, like I will take photos. So I will start the painting, and if I don't finish it before it gets dark, then I will take photos and I will keep working till I finish it.
Mm,
Um, but usually I don't. Occasionally you can do it in the take it forward to the next day. But with flowers, especially, they tend to move by the next day, so it's usually quite different. So it's almost better to do it in one setting. So none of those are really huge. They're pretty small paintings, so they can be done in one sitting. Yeah.
mm, that's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah,
And the
that's nice.
same is true with landscapes as well. Like I will start paintings on location, and unless I'm at an event where there are rules about how much of the painting you have to finish on location, I will paint like 70 to 80%, and then come home and finish it.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
interesting. Because I wondered
yeah.
whether how much you'd be able to do, not necessarily alla prima work, because that is in one session, because it felt as though when we were talking about the sunflowers, you give yourself the opportunity to step back and reevaluate some of the directions the painting may be taking in order to make more informed decisions as you continue. Is that something you consciously do?
Yes, definitely. It's really important to take a break when you're painting. I will take, I mean, there is not like a timer based breaks, but just it's more like gut feeling like, okay, I'm stuck right now. So let me just, it's more become more intuitive now. So I just like will go eat lunch or something and not look at the painting for a while. So then when I come back, I can look at it with fresh eyes. So I think it's really important to take a break because um, you can just get carried away and sucked into it, and you're just working on something that maybe is not even the thing that needs to be worked on. So,
Mm. Well,
yeah.
with you being away at the moment, I'm wondering, do you use a sketchbook? Do you take a sketchbook away with you and use that?
Um, I'm not so much of a sketchbook person. I do have sketchbooks. I've done many challenges in the past where, like 100 portraits and things like that. But um, yeah, I have to force myself to sketch in a sketchbook. I'm not really that into that. But when I work from photographs, I will do a value study using Procreate. Um, so that way I can work out the design before I get to the painting.
Mm.
So I find it really useful. Like it's much quicker to do it on Procreate than in a sketchbook. So yeah, like to make changes and stuff, I find it easier.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about your still life work. What is it about landscape that captures you specifically above other subjects?
I think it's just my personality. Like I'm just an outdoor person. I love hiking. I just love being out there, and I have done loved that since like childhood. Like I've hiked in India as well growing up. So that's just been a part of me. So doing painting the landscape outside is just combining two of my loves,
Yeah.
being outside and painting on location. So it just makes me happy. Yeah, that's what I realized. Like when I was pregnant and I had my baby, I didn't do plein air for quite a while, like almost a year. And so when I went back out after that, I was like, okay, like this is important for me to do this just for my like mental well-being. Just being
Mm.
outside and painting is just something that's yeah, brings me a lot of joy. Yeah.
Yeah. So would
But
you,
maybe your question was more about what inspires me. I don't know. Did I answer your
yeah.
question?
Well, I'd like, yeah, I mean, if you could go into what inspires you about the landscape, that would be really interesting as well, actually. So yeah, please.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So for me, I think it's uh, usually it's color that I'm inspired by, like color or something, or relationships of the colors that I'm seeing. But I'm trying harder to because I think it's more important. The design is the most important thing. Like if your design sucks, no matter how like if you put good color, the painting's not gonna work out. Trying to have the ability like to see shapes, like to be so you look at a scene and you kind of decide what you want to paint based on the shapes that you see and the potential of the shapes, I guess. So that's part of it. So light and shadow, um, color, um, what else? It's just like usually for me, when I'm on location or when I'm painting from life, it's important that I capture something about my visual experience of the scene in my painting. It's kind of hard to articulate exactly what it will be, but like I won't feel a painting is finished on there has to be a personal touch in that. It should not just be a copy of what I see. Something about my experience, but I don't know how. I don't know if I can articulate it better. Uh, like what it is that it's just something that you probably hope will show through in the painting.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wonder if weather conditions factor in as well, because here in the UK we have dramatic from sunny days to rainy days. Today's especially
Mm.
stormy and rainy at the moment, and I film quite often, and I'll set up a camera in the car to film where I'm driving. And what
Uh-huh.
I noticed was that as much as a sunny day you think would offer more contrast, what actually happened was when it was raining, the the puddles would create this shine, and then the
Mm.
buildings would be darker because the sky, as much as it's overcast, the sky would be, a light midtone, and the buildings were almost like sponges. They kind of soaked up the moisture and went darker. And then the
Mm.
floor was more luminous in areas because of the puddles. And it's something I didn't notice in person, but when I watched the video back, it was far more interesting visually than it
Right.
was with when it was dry and sunny, which I thought was
Right.
really nice to see that it had its own aesthetic, even though the weather sometimes seems gloomy and miserable. It was actually really vibrant and beautiful to see how the rain fed everything this kind of interesting light and dark and this interplay.
Yeah.
You ever kind of experience that when you're out? You surely see things in terms of paints,
Yeah.
because when I walk around the world, when painting to the extent that you do, you'll surely see things in brushstrokes and in kind of color compositions and things like that. Is that something which you walk around and consider
A-
how
All the
this?
time.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, all the time, everywhere. I just like I can't turn off the brain. Like I'm just walking anywhere. I'm just like looking at things, like thinking, how would I compose this? How would I compose?
yeah,
So it's just all the time. But also, I think while you were talking, the thought that came to me was one of the things that you get out of plein air painting, which you don't get if you just were to click a photo and go home and paint it, is this experience of being out there, of watching the light change, of watching um, like the weather change, like just seeing how things change and move. um, that does something to your memory. Like you're able to build up this memory, which you can then recall later on, which you won't get if you were just to go there, take a photo in like 2 seconds and go back home. You're not going to have that memory that you have when you would get out of uh, like just watching the whole thing happen, unfold in front of your eyes. Yeah.
yeah. No, I can
Yeah.
appreciate that. I think a lot of my plein air paintings, if I look at them, I can remember the feeling of the air. And obviously,
Yeah.
photograph, you have no memory of what the air
Yeah.
felt like because you're not experiencing the air interplay with your skin and with your paint and with, the environment. So that's a major
Yeah.
factor as well as the light, isn't it, really?
Yes. Yes, for sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
So is there any, because I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I always ask people if they have interesting stories from plein air painting, because I've had some fairly calamitous attempts at
Hmm.
going out plein air painting where, because I'm in North Wales, it's all mountains and fields and beautiful, and I'm next to the sea, so I'll drive to the mountains to go and find this, vista to paint, but I'll get lost and I'll be walking through fields and I won't be able to find my way out, and sometimes it feels a bit, I'm finding cattle and ancient walls, and yet I can't find the gate that I went through to get back out, and
Uh-huh.
it's becoming like marshland, and I just think I'm stuck
Yeah.
now. This is really bad. So have you had any kind of interesting or strange experiences out there plein air painting where it's
Hmm.
an adventure?
Not too strange, but a couple of experiences come to mind. They're not like terrible or anything. One was I don't know. I love painting the moon. So I like to go out and paint the moon, and oftentimes I actually go out to paint by myself. So sometimes it's like a little late and maybe not the best idea to be out there alone. So two experiences of painting late at night. One was I was with a friend in Glacier National Park, and we were painting a nocturne. And all of a sudden, we saw something like ice look at us and scurry away. And we were like, "Oh my gosh!" We were so scared because we were the only ones out there. And we are in this national park, and it could be anything. We're not sure what it was, but we thought that maybe it was a fox. So it was quite a scary experience. So we just sort of packed up and and decided to come back the next day.
Yeah.
Because when, especially in the national park where there could be bears, wolves, anything, right? So we don't know what. We just had to be safe. And there's other experience where so I like I said, I paint the moon often. So I go to these wetlands near my house, marshland, and yeah, sometimes I'll get the timing wrong. And this one time, like really, it was super late, and it's like about 3/4 of a mile hike into the spot where I was. And by the time I packed up, it was like completely dark, and I was the only one out there, and I had to hike back, and I could hear coyotes howling in the
No.
distance. So I was like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of here. But so
Yeah.
I called, but there was cell phone reception. So I just called my husband. I'm like, just be on call with me, make sure I get out. And fortunately, I was okay. I did make it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't recommend anybody doing this. But
No.
yeah, yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it's
but the
funny.
things that, some things you do just because you love to paint the moon.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, you have to try these things as well, just to sort of experience the different times of day, the different lights, and to appreciate
Yeah.
the actual outside world. But yeah, it can be
Yeah.
so unusual and unexpected what you can come across. And I
Yeah.
was thinking with your friend when you saw the eyes and the national,
Yeah.
whether it changed your brushstrokes, you'd be like, okay, now quickly,
Yeah.
okay, we're done. Let's back up and go.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think yeah, she had like a truck, so I think we just climbed on top to the back of her truck. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, something like that we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had
Yeah,
an
yeah.
elevated position, all of a sudden the painting changed vantage point.
Perspective is
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind going on to your color palette. If you can
Yeah.
share what colors you use and yeah, well, first of all, what colors do you use for your palette, please?
Yeah, I use a warm and cool of each primary. So I use ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, cad red light, quinacridone rose, cad yellow lemon, cad yellow medium, and titanium white. I also use yellow ochre and Payne's gray. These are like convenience colors. I could mix them, but just to make my life easier. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's usually my palette. And in fact, I use this palette for all of my master studies as well, and it's really versatile. I felt like I didn't need to add any more colors for any of those studies. For one study, I thought I would need Indian yellow, but I didn't end up using it after all that much. So yeah.
Oh wow. So aside from the Payne's gray, it's literally just a split primary and a white, which I think is brilliant because it's a really what do you call it, a reduced palette or a kind of yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yellow ochre as well. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
this
yeah.
is this something you've always done, or have you reduced the palette down to what you have now?
Um, I think this is what my teachers Wu basically teaches with. Yeah,
Mm.
so I've experimented with adding colors and stuff, but um, I don't feel like I use them. I put them out, but yeah. So I just like yeah, I find this to be quite a versatile palette. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is this, do you use the warm and cool kind of strategically in the painting? Is this to add depth, or is there any kind of rationality behind the application of the warm and cool?
Um, it's more based on observations. So it's color mixing is like about asking those questions like what is the hue, what is the value, what is the saturation. So I will pick the color based on what are the answers to this question. So so for example, if it needs to be redder, like if my mixture needs to be redder, I can either pick cad red light or I can pick quinacridone rose. And the choice depends on what I'm observing. Like, is it a cooler, like as I'm adding red, does it need to go slightly cooler or does it need to be warmer? So based on that, those questions, I will add the colors. So I would say it's based on observation.
That's really nice. Okay. Because I can see in your paintings you have this lovely use of a kind of it's not overly saturated, which I always think is nicer because that way the colors come across more powerful. Sometimes when people have highly saturated colors, I think it almost detracts from the natural beauty that you've observed. So is that something which you learnt in school? Was that observation or a bit of both? Because there seems to be this, as I said, it seems as though it has this ability to look like classic art as well, because it has this lovely muted tones that you use to create this beautiful vibrancy with the landscape.
Yeah, I would say it's based on observation. So it's both. So at times I want to also push them in certain directions. So I'm always experimenting. So when I paint, I always try to paint with some intention. So each painting will start off with some goal in my mind, and that goal is usually based on either something I've seen or some master artist I'm looking at. And I'll be like, oh, let me try and push this or push that. But basically, usually what sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
That's
So
okay.
your question was
I suppose the question's about how you kind of mature this observation of the power of the mid-tone range, I suppose, instead of dramatic lights and darks and extreme saturation. You've got this lovely muted tonal range, which I think describes things more beautifully and elegantly, to be honest. So
yeah, I think I'm really drawn to more tonal paintings, but I can't get myself to become a complete tonalist. So so a few things like observation. So nature is always more muted than what you think it is. Like even the blue of like you see this ocean that's vibrant blue, it's not going to be out of the tube blue. Um, I remember one time, a teacher showed me. I had painted this like really dark ultramarine blue for my ocean, and I was wearing a blue jacket, and he picked my sleeve, and he said, "Look, this is really blue, and that is not." So it's all about comparison. So that's like you look at something really bright and saturated, and if you put it up next to nature, you're not going to find those pure pigments out there. So part of the reason I grade things down is because of that. And sometimes I see sometimes certain artists, they will intentionally grade their paintings even more than what you see. So sometimes I will experiment with that just to see if I can pull it off. Um, Sometimes I try, not very often, but sometimes I'll try some palettes which are even more limited, like just one red, yellow, and blue, and they may not be my usual ones. They may be something different. Sometimes I'll try the Zon palette. So it just depends. So it depends on the palette choice. So sometimes the goal is to try and so the goal is always to try and replicate the relationships that you see and not exactly copy everything just as you see it. So I'm always trying to, like, if you paint with intention, sometimes you can decide a color scheme or some sort of dominant color for your painting, and then you can push everything. The decisions are made based on that as well as observation. So you have to decide sometimes. So sometimes you might see a really bright saturated green out there, like a spring green, but you can choose to not paint it that bright, depending on where it is in your painting and how it fits into your painting. So yeah, so observation as well as intention will decide the colors that end up in the painting.
I had this conversation recently with a guest about the importance of keen and accurate observation compared to serving a piece through artistic liberties and design choices, and the concern of teaching those things when people can say that was a choice where it doesn't serve the observation, and it's a concern that they're just losing accuracy as opposed to consciously making a choice and then retroactively explaining it as a decision they've made, as opposed to a kind of color mixing error. And that's, I suppose it's a precarious kind of line that you're walking there, but because I'm an advocate for making those decisions, because otherwise you're kind of constrained by what you can see, as opposed to saying, this is what I see, but I'd prefer if I can just move this over, which a lot of artists do. I think it was, I can't remember the artist's name now.
Was it David Baird?
David Baird was, yeah.
Yeah. I just heard that one, so that's why I remember this part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I'm teaching, I try to it's a little more literal in terms of the color mixing. It's like try to make it more observation based than like it depends again what you're teaching, right? So if I'm teaching color schemes and color harmony, then I'm going to explain how I would take a color and change it according to my intention of the color scheme or the color harmony. But if I'm just trying to teach something else, like based on if I'm teaching some other topic like design or something, then it's like, okay, focus on the design aspect of it. And when it comes to the color mix, or if I'm teaching color mixing, it's maybe more important that it is observation based, because that's going to, like, part of color mixing is deciding what is the color that you're observing, right? Because that's going to guide what you're going to mix. So if that is the main topic, like color observation is the main topic. In fact, that is a topic I cover in my workshops. Then it's going to be like, okay, don't try and change it, because our goal is to observe and try and mix that. So I think it has to be like I said, if you're changing it, there has to be an intention behind it, and that intention should make sense. So that's how I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think would you consider that to be a more intermediate to advanced process of decision making regarding design, and you need to be maybe focused more on accuracy in the earlier stages of your development, so that you have that ability to make decisions based on informed choices, as opposed to, as I said, like inexperience guiding your decision making?
Yeah, I think so. Like a very beginner, I think would be better off not trying to change anything. But I think it's important to also uh, like experiment with these things, like to push yourself with these things as you're growing, right? It shouldn't because you shouldn't end up in a stage where you just feel like tied up by your reference and feel like you're just all you're doing is copying a photograph. So it's tricky. You need to balance both. So you need to as a beginner, yeah, it might be you may be better off just trying to use observation and try to build up that skill. So what I say is there are all these painting principles, like you have design, color, value, brushwork, edges, all of these drawing, all of these things. My best advice for artists is to always focus on one principle at a time when you're painting, so that, like I said, it won't you're not overwhelmed by all the decisions that you have to make with respect to all of the painting principles. So for example, you say, okay, for a few weeks now, I'm just going to focus on color, and I'm going to focus on observational color mixing. So just then you let that be your intention, and that skill will improve. And then you feel like, okay, maybe I can try out a color scheme now. Try it. And then maybe you have to go back to observational color mixing, and that's fine. But just having intention, I think, is really important when you're learning. and when you're studying, because like, you have, like they say, you need to put in 10,000 hours of brush mileage, but they need to be like sort of intentional 10,000 hours and not just mindless copying of a photo or of any reference. So at least that's how I think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've definitely been to art classes where someone's been there for probably coming up to 10,000 hours and they never really progress because they're not using that critical lens on their own work.
Yeah.
And with me sat next to them, I always kind of say, shall I show you what I'm doing? They say, yeah. And I was like, can I show you on your, because it's not necessarily a taught class. The one which I'm thinking of wasn't taught. It was just a group that would sit and have a model in front of us. And I'd always help the lady next to me because she'd always say, you know what you're doing, don't you? And I said, well, I can help you understand the difference if you like. I mean, I loved her drawing because it was so individual. I mean, speaking of which, I was going to ask you about whether you have this question from any of your students of how to convey your own individuality in painting, or I suppose they'd say it as style, and how to develop that. Have you had this question, and how do you consider the development of your own style?
So I think style is kind of something, it's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing what you like and what you dislike. And as you are learning all these painting principles, it's good to be aware of it. So you try out different things, and some things will stick, will be the ones that you like. And so focusing on the painting principles and being aware of your own likes and dislikes, both of these put together will help you develop your own voice. And so I know like I've heard this a lot where they'll say not to focus on style at all, just focus on the principles. But I think there's some value to being aware of what you like and what you don't like, and having that in your mind when you're painting, instead of just saying, okay, I'm not going to worry about style at all. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does to me.
Yeah,
but sorry, no, please go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's a balance, because you can't just be like, oh, I'm only after style and I'm not going to worry about the painting principles, because they are more important, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, for example, a tonalist is somebody, is an artist who places a lot of importance to design and values as opposed to color. So as a stylistic choice, they're choosing not to focus on color like too much, right? To focus more on the tonal aspect of the landscape. So that's so an artist like who is just coming up could, like, you could try that out and see, okay, does that speak to you? Like, do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy not having to worry about color? Or is color important to you? Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. The same is true for brushwork. I think it's important to have that as a painting principle that you focus on once in a while, along with everything else. So it's not, I don't think that you should like not worry about brushwork at all, because if that is important to you, you can have that as your intention for certain paintings. And like I said, when you're focusing on, say, brushwork, it's okay if your design is not great or your color is not great. But as long as, like, you will learn something about brushwork and about what you like about the certain kind of strokes that maybe that you experimented with, if you focus on that as a an intentional focus while you're studying. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Yeah, absolutely it does. Because I think it's the decisions which people need to make in order to find what's important to them. Excuse me. The only thing I was wondering about is that if anyone, I mean, this is only me thinking about anyone who's watching who may think that their concern could be that their work could appear to be derivative of another artist, and how to avoid that, or how to utilize heavy influence so that you don't seem to be just mimicking work that's previously been successful.
Yeah, so I don't, so when I say you experiment with brushwork, I think it's more about like, so basically what happens is you see something and you may try that, and either a part of it will stick if it resonates with you, or it will, or none of it will stick. And then you see something else and you pick that. So you're like cherry picking, and all that put together, you find your voice. And it's just like initially all that copying will be like intentional, where you're actually trying to mimic, but that's not the goal. Eventually you want it to come from within. So all this is to say that at least when I paint, what I do is I try to break my painting sessions into sort of logical and intuitive sessions. So when I'm in a so the logical part is where I would think about the design or an intentional color scheme or things like that. But then when I'm actually painting, I really try to tap into my intuition and not let every brush stroke be very like have a lot of thought behind every brush stroke, but let it come more intuitively. And I'm not always successful at it, but I try to achieve that every time I go into the studio. Because when I do that, it's more the brushwork is more organic, and it's not like very like it's not like what's the word, like I don't want it to be very forced. It should be sort of natural, and so I'm not like trying to copy anybody, but I'm inspired by other people. So it may give me ideas of, oh, I can actually try a brushstroke like this or like that. Or even like my teacher has shown us ways to where you cut back into stuff, and instead of just painting to the edge, like you paint beyond that and you cut back. So that gives a certain kind of feeling to a piece. So you can just experiment with all these different things. So your goal, like the goal is always to tap into something that's within you. But if you don't know what it is, like for example, like you are like you just don't want to copy anybody, you don't want to mimic anybody, uh, then you're just going to paint in a certain way, uh, which uh, which you may not like, which may not be the only way that it can be done. Like there are so many different ways that it can be done. So for example, when I first started, like I had this way of painting, like especially when I'm very conscious, uh, like if my teacher would stand behind my back, I would resort to this way of painting, which was very mechanical. And and then like she would come and show me how to be more free and loose, and I would be like, oh, okay, I didn't know I could do it this other way. So once I tried the other way, then in my studio, in my own personal space, I can try to push that in any direction. Like just like sometimes you just have a very limited like ways in which you work naturally, but when you try what others have done, it will open your mind up to possibilities, possibilities that you may not arrive at on your own unless you try.
Yeah, it does make sense. No, I thought it was
Yeah.
wonderful what you just said.
Okay.
I mean, would it be fair for me to say you're saying that instead of it being a calculated mark or brushstroke, it's instead informed by experience and knowledge, that you let your intuition guide your marks based on your preferences that have led to this point, as opposed to it being, I'm going to do this because I want it to be this way. You allow it to happen because you've fed this knowledge to this point where you can shape things in a way that you feel serves, or not even that you're kind of moving in that direction for the painting, as opposed to making choices, you're allowing yourself to feel your way through the painting. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I feel as though I see in your paintings a knowledge that's come through as opposed to a calculated, um, decision where you've thought, I'm going to do it this way because I know this. Instead, it's the knowledge
Yeah.
flows through the brush as opposed to the other.
Yeah. It's knowledge that's come through experimenting. So I think experimentation is a huge part of it, where you try it in different, like try putting down different strokes in different ways. Like if you paint an apple and you always go with vertical strokes, just what will happen if you go along the form instead of against?
Mm.
Those kinds of decisions and all those experiments build up the knowledge.
Yeah.
So eventually, when you tap into your intuition, it is all that knowledge that is coming through,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
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 And that's what gives you your style and your individuality, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, that's great. No, that's lovely to know. So now it comes to the part where I'd like to know, how's your what is your kind of relationship with galleries? Do you exhibit in many places, and what's your experience been there?
So right now, I mainly sell through my website, which is bhavanikrishnan.com. And I show in a few galleries for as part of the national shows sometimes. So for right now, I have a show at the AIS Small Works show in Anderson Fine Art. And then locally, I show at a gallery called, it's a framing shop, Chrisman Framing and Gallery. But my main source is through my website. Yeah.
Are all the links to your physical exhibitions linked on your website as well? Can people find the information there? You're not-
Not sure. I can send you the information. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I'll put the links in the description of this video so
Okay.
people can see it in person if they are able to see your work
Okay.
physically. And then obviously
Yeah.
links to your website for people to purchase it there. Is there any other social media you'd like to promote where people should go to support you and to see your work?
Yeah. Mainly I do Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook, although I don't do all that much, but yeah, Bhavani Krishnan art on both. And also recently started doing threads
Yeah, me
just
too.
because, everyone's doing it. Like, I don't know what's the reason, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm there. So if you're on threads, you can find me there as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. But Instagram has been my main place to share. Yep.
Lovely. Well, the links
Yeah.
for all those will be in the description of the video and the description of wherever you've seen the podcast or heard it. So on any platform where you found the podcast, there will be links in the description to go and see and support your work. I really appreciate you being a guest on the podcast. It's been lovely talking to you.
Oh, it's my honor. Thank you so much for asking me. I've had a wonderful time chatting with you.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.